we all need to share, care, and be fair. We need that, and we need to give. And so all of that speaks to a way of living, a necessity for the human condition that we don't engage in all that much anymore. So I think all of that is what unleashes healing for people.
Yeah, I think that's really true. We're all very much focused on ourselves and our own needs most of the time. And that attention or intention outside the body for the good of others or the good of a whole lot of others really creates a big shift within ourselves. And
Oh, it totally does. It totally does. It oftentimes when somebody isn't getting anywhere, I say to them, get off of yourself. Start intending for someone else who needs it more and watch what happens.
hi, I'm Liz Larson.
And I'm Bill McKenna.
And together, we created the Cognomovement system. And we'd like to welcome you to the New Life Perspectives radio show,
where we're going to be sharing with you tools, tips, and ideas that are going to change your life.
Hello, hello, in UK Health Radio Land. I'm Liz Larson, and I'm here with my friend,
Bill McKenna.
Hey, Bill McKenna. And we're the hosts of the New Life Perspectives radio show here on the UK Health Radio Network. And we just happen to be the team that created the Cognomovement system. And with great joy, we would like to introduce our guest today. It's someone that I consider a godmother, a fairy godmother, in the kind of work that Bill and I do and thousands of other people do around the planet. It's Lynne McTaggart, and she paved the way for all of us to talk about the things we're going to talk about today: intention, the field. We can talk about the field and not mean a grassy field where the cows eat. We know that that means the field that we all contribute to. So good morning and welcome, Lynne.
Good morning. It's great to be here with you. You want to know a little more about me?
Yes, please.
Okay, I am the award-winning author of many international bestsellers, including The Field, The Intention Experiment, The Bond, and my latest book, The Power of Eight. I'm also the architect of a thing called the Intention Experiment to test the power of group intention, large group intention, to heal the world. And I'm the architect of the Power of Eight, which is looking at small group intention and lots of other things, including a health magazine called What Doctors Don't Tell You. So I wear many hats, but my big focus is on healing people, each other, and the world.
Wonderful. That's amazing. And it's everything that Bill and I talk about every day. And we want to just personally thank you for the work, because it really is so foundational for the rest of us. Bill actually has a story that he wanted to share with you about this.
So, gosh, first of all, I got to tell everybody, on UK Health Radio, you're on the radio, you can't see this today, but for all of you on YouTube, I came on with Lynne this morning and I go, oh my God, do you see her eyes? They are absolutely beautiful and filled with light. I was like, oh my gosh, look at that. But, this type of thing, people that are, well, like her, right? It shines through. And it was so beautiful to see. But the story that I want here to relay to everybody, because we have all these people all over the world, and some of you're like, what are you talking about? Intention experiments and this sort of thing. Well, I just want to start this off where I was in your shoes, and I would be like, I don't know about that. That's maybe, wishful thinking. Until the day that I went to a guy, his name was Bert Goldman. And Bert Goldman, he was a monk. They called him the American monk. He was Yogananda, the autobiography of a yogi. He was actually a monk with him, and long since left that. But he was really interesting because he was living a different reality. And by that I mean, I'm in an auditorium, and he says, is there anybody in here with pain? Anybody in here with pain? And a woman puts her hand up, and he said, okay, come on up here. And he says, what do you got? She said, fibromyalgia. How long you had it? Oh, I don't know, 35, 38 years. 35 to 38 years. Okay, and what's the level of pain that you're in? Well, it fluctuates, but most days it's an 8 to a 9. An 8 to a 9. If you've been into 8 to a 9 pain, you know how bad that is and how miserable you'll be. So he grabs a bottle of water. He grabs a bottle of water, and he closes his eyes for a minute, and I mean just a minute. He taps on the bottle of water, and this is just a bottle of water out of one of those, crates, and he hands it to her. He says, drink this, drink, take 2 gulps. She takes 2 gulps. She walks to the back of the room, and then, and now come back. Walks up. Okay, what's it now? Well, it's like maybe a 2, and she's kind of confused. Okay, take another gulp. She takes another gulp. Now walk to the back of the room. She walks to the back of the room. She comes back, and he said, okay, what's it now? Is it it's a 0. I don't have it. I don't, it's very confusing after 35, 38 years. So anyway, I mean, I had the opportunity because of a multi-day event, and I'm like, that sounds like some horse, there's 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 so much BS in here. There's got to be a pony here somewhere. I'm going to look around for the pony. But anyway, bottom line is I checked in with this lady over 3 days, nothing, completely gone. And I would, pulled her aside and say, hey, what's the real deal? What's going on? She said, oh my God, I don't even know. I can't believe it. It's the weirdest thing. I don't even know what to say. Anyway, my point is that not only is what Lynne McTaggart talking about true, it's real, and you can do it. You can change reality. There's a couple of little things you got to know about how to do it, but it can be done. It's repeatable. And she's got now people across the world doing this. It is something as what I would call a basic life skill. You should know this in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. You should have been taught way back when about this. Having said that, Lynne, tell us about how all this started for you and what your journey was.
Okay. My background is as an investigative reporter. That's how I started out life in my 20s. I was busting big international baby selling rings with hidden tape recorders. And I wanted to put these bad guys in jail. That was my plan. But I started getting interested in journalism about health and healing. And in the course of doing that, my husband and I started what was then a newsletter, now a magazine, called What Doctors Don't Tell You. And we were looking at what works and what doesn't work in conventional and alternative medicine and studying the scientific literature. And in that, I kept coming across these really good studies of spiritual healing. And so the journalist in me said, wait a minute, if we can have a thought and send it to someone else and make them better, that essentially undermines everything we think about how the world works. So I set out to find out why. And I thought, well, I'll just speak to some consciousness researchers, scientists working at prestigious universities. They'll tell me what's going on, maybe human energy fields. I'll write it up, and that'll be that. Well, that wasn't that. When I started researching, I found scientists who were doing experimental evidence showing that we are on the brink of a completely new understanding of the world, a completely new science. So scientists don't like to speculate. They never do. And they also don't speak in English. They speak in code. So I soon realized I was going to have to put all of this together and put it into ordinary English. So that became my book, The Field. But there was some unfinished business, which was much of the evidence looking at the idea that thoughts are an actual something with the capacity to change physical matter. So the journalist in me said, well, how far can we take this? Are we talking about very subtle effects like shifting a quantum particle a little bit to the left or right? Or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? I was also interested in what happens when lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time. Does that magnify the effect? So I decided with my next book to write up all of the evidence about intention and how it works and all the ways it works, but also to invite people to take part in a big experiment to find out how far we can take this. Because by then I knew a lot of scientists working at all of these prestigious universities, working on consciousness research, physicists, biologists, etc. I also had lots of readers because the field was in about 30 languages then. So I thought, well, if I put them together, I'll have the biggest laboratory in the world. So that's what I did. I started the intention experiment in 2007. We've run 40 experiments to date, everything from trying to make seeds grow faster, to purifying water with our thoughts, to lowering violence in war-torn or violent areas, to healing someone with post-traumatic stress disorder. And of those 40, 36 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. And the people who measured it are scientists from University of Arizona, University of California, Princeton, Penn State University, and many universities in Europe. So we have some very interesting evidence that we can take it pretty far.
I know the audience here is like, whoa, pump the brakes. Wait a second. 40 experiments, 40, 36 of them these are basically almost Ivy League or Ivy League institutions verifying that these are actually getting a positive effect. And you're not talking about trivial matters. These things that you're pointing to, all those list of experiments, amazing. Tell us about some of the results. Like tell us about that.
Okay, so around 2008, we started doing peace intention experiments. The scientists in the very beginning convinced me to do seed experiments, water experiments, and we did that. But by 2008, I said, hey, let's do something huge. Let's end a war. So we had to find a war where we could actually get data about whether people fewer are getting injured or dying. And that's really hard because no country likes to talk about the bodies if they're in a war, if they're in the middle of a war. So we finally found a 25-year war going on in Sri Lanka, a civil war, and nobody was winning. Neither side was winning. So you had the rebels who had choked off the North. They were holding the whole North captive. And then you had the government, and both sides were, just creating an ongoing bloodbath. So we did an intention over 8 days, meaning 10 minutes a day for 8 days. And I had about 15 to 25,000 people, I think, participating. And what happened was, and it was kind of frightening at first, violence quadrupled during that week. And I thought, oh my goodness, did we do this? But then it plummeted. And interestingly enough, we found out later why the violence had gone up. We found that during that very week, the government won the most decisive battles of the campaign, of that 25-year campaign, which enabled it to turn around the entire course of the war. 3 months later, they were able to recapture the North, and a few months after that, the 25-year war was over. Now, did we do this? Short answer, who knows? But when you start doing it again and again, it starts getting interesting. Because remember, there's a lot of variables with a war. And we were lucky in that situation, we were able to get data from 2 years before and some months afterwards. So we could show our effect. But we did that even more with St. Louis, Missouri, officially the most violent place in America, particularly a neighborhood, a particular area called Fairground is officially the most violent place in America. So with that, we were able to get very detailed injury, property crime, and violent crime injuries and deaths from the police. So we got 3 years before and 6 months afterward. And this time I worked with Dr. Jessica Utz, who is and I'd worked with her on Sri Lanka too. She is a professor of statistics and is an expert in examining consciousness research. So I had her have all of this data. We did an intention for 6 days this time, 10 minutes a day. And afterward, we waited 6 months. And then she looked at the 3 years before, the 6 months afterward of St. Louis as a whole. And violent and property crime had continued to go up on an upward trajectory, the trajectory it had been before our intention experiment. So did property crime in Fairground. But violent crime, the focus of our intention, went down by 43%. And none of the surrounding neighborhoods had the same result. So that was quite a dramatic one.
I mean,
but very interesting, but not the biggest thing of all.
So hold that thought just for a moment. We need to take a break here for the UK Health Radio Network. And when we come back, we'll hear the biggest thing of all. This is so interesting. All right, UK Health Radio, take it away. And we're back. We're here with Lynne McTaggart in this fascinating conversation about remote influence, changing things at a distance for the better. And Lynne had us on the edge of our seats with what was the biggest thing you changed? And then I would like to pre-ask the question, who are these people that are intending these things that are happening on such a massive level? So please tell us, what's the biggest thing?
Okay, the people who are intending on this mass level are just people who were followers of mine. They're just ordinary folks. They're not necessarily talented in this. Many, many people have never done this before. And of course, I'm running mass intention experiments, and there haven't been too many of those either. There have been mass meditations through transcendental meditation, but not people all focused on the same exact thought at the same exact time. So one of the most remarkable outcomes that occurs every single time I do a peace intention experiment isn't just the effect on the target, it's the effect on the participants. I survey people, and I have done since 2008, to find out what happened to them after the experiment. Mostly I was just trying to figure out whether or not they'd been able to participate, get on the internet at the same time we were running it. But when I first started doing it, I started getting information like this. From the Sri Lanka experiment, I felt like I was part of a bigger network. I was crying uncontrollably. I had goosebumps going up and down my body. The energy was like being in the tractor beam of Star Trek. Now, remember, these are people like I am today, sitting in front of their computers, participating by themselves. So they're only connected by essentially a psychic network. And yet they were having these extraordinary effects. But even more, peace started occurring in their lives. They made up with their estranged partners, or talked to their estranged parents for the first time in 20 years, or got contacted by an estranged child, adult child, for the first time in many years. They changed their life purpose in many cases. Lots of people quit their jobs and joined things like the Peace Corps. And also about a third of them healed or got very much better of a long-standing condition. And that happens with every peace intention experiment. Even more interesting, I ran one like this to heal violence in Jerusalem about a decade later. And I had special equipment enabling me to put cameras in auditoriums in 8 Arab cities. And then the 9th camera was in an auditorium of Israeli Jews. So I had Jews and Israelis plus my internet audience taking part in this experiment. And lo and behold, we did the experiment. There was some compelling evidence that violence did go down. But again, not the point of the story. What was much more interesting was what was happening between the Arabs and the Israelis. Through this special equipment, I could speak to them and show all of those different auditoriums through the cameras, and they could speak individually to each other. And so we had people from Jordan and Oman and Kuwait, etc., Saudi Arabia, saying to these Israeli Jews, "Your God is my God." And the Israelis saying back to the Arabs, "We love you, brother and sister. You are our brothers from the other side." And on this went. And we've had this kind of situation several times, most recently with Republicans and Democrats who are part of an intention to keep violence down during the inauguration of Joe Biden. So what I've found is it's as healing for the participants as it is for the target.
That is absolutely incredible. I mean, the fact that it's back and forth between the intention and the people, the intention, and it sounds like the whole consciousness raises. So that's my language. What language would you put that in? How do you explain the fact that you're not only changing the thing you're experimenting with, but that the people are changed?
I think it has to do with an experience of oneness. I see this in my smaller groups, which are called Power of 8. I call them Power of 8 groups. And I started scaling it all down in 2008 to see what would happen if we just had groups of 8 or so and have somebody in the group with a health crisis be intended for by the group. And I have found those same experiences happening in these smaller groups where the people who are doing the intending are just as likely to heal when they're sending as when they are the receiver. And the same experiences of feeling essentially in a mystical state. They don't feel their body. They feel like they are part of some extraordinary network. They are essentially experiencing a transcendent state. And we've demonstrated that with brainwave studies that I conducted with a team of neuroscientists at Life University, the most prestigious chiropractic university in the world. They put their neuroscience team at my disposal. We measured these Power of 8 groups, and we found very quickly that when people do intention in a group like that, even student volunteers who have never done this before, that was our experimenters, very quickly, the parts of the brain that make us feel separate, the parietal lobes sitting back here, and the right frontal lobes involved in worry, doubt, and negativity. All of the things that make us feel, this is me, this is not me, they were dialed way down. So these brainwave signatures look nothing like meditation as we thought they might. They looked almost identical to University of Pennsylvania research examining Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer and Sufi masters during chanting and their special dancing. So these are people in a state of ecstatic oneness. And I think that's the secret sauce. There are many reasons why intention works. Intention itself works. We're co-creators of our world, as quantum physics demonstrates to us. But one of the most compelling elements is the fact that although we are the field, our subatomic particles are conducting a little game of subatomic tennis with all of the other subatomic particles in the world. But we don't experience life in the field. We experience the life as being separate. And, I end with the hair on my skin. And so we don't get to experience the field, even though we are the field, we're part of the field. But we do during an intention. That separation melts away and we finally feel oneness. And I think that is one of the keys to why these experiments and power vape groups are so healing. I mean, I've watched thousands of healings in power vape groups since 2008. I've seen 2 people get up out of their wheelchairs, one of whom was paralyzed from the neck down. I've had so many cases of people who were so sick with stage 4 cancer who were healed. I had a woman come to a retreat of mine last year, and she wasn't going to come. She came with her son because she was very sick from stage 4 cancer. We encouraged her to come, and I put people into Power of 8 groups, and she was in a library in this stately home we ran the retreat in. And she said from there, they did an intention for her, and she felt such extraordinary love and connection with this group. It set her on a healing path. And without chemotherapy, radiation, and all of the usual surgery, she is healed of stage 4 cancer. So I've had many, many, many stories like that. And I think it's oneness. And I also think it is the power of altruism. Most of the time, you're intending for something or somebody else. And the science shows that's extraordinarily strengthening and healing.
We've heard this so many times that a vibration of love or above, or in the Hawkins scale 500, changes everything. Do you think that maybe that's part of what's happening is the people, because you're vibrating or intending for someone outside yourself, putting yourself in a state of a love for others, do you think that that is what is creating the extraordinary change? Or do you have a suspicion that it's something else?
Well, I don't talk in the language of the scale, although I appreciate David Hawkins' work, and before him, Dr. Diamond, who really discovered behavioral kinesiology and the work that he's doing. But what I see is the power of altruism. There's a great deal of science showing that people who do things for other people, it's not just a feel-good effect. They live longer, healthier, happier lives. And if they're ill with something and they help somebody else with the same condition, they're more likely to heal. That plus the whole thing of community. One of the things that I've studied a great deal is the human need for community. We need to belong to something bigger than ourselves. We need not to be isolated, which is why lockdown was so destructive for so many people. We need to be part of a greater whole. And so I think being involved in that and giving, the humans, and I wrote about this in my book, The Bond, we all need to share, care, and be fair. We need that, and we need to give. And so all of that speaks to a way of living, a necessity for the human condition, that we don't engage in all that much anymore. So I think all of that is what unleashes healing for people.
Yeah, I think that's really true. We're all very much focused on ourselves and our own needs most of the time. And that attention or intention outside the body for the good of others or the good of a whole lot of others really creates a big shift within ourselves. And
Oh, it totally does. It totally does. It oftentimes when somebody isn't getting anywhere, I say to them, get off of yourself. Start intending for someone else who needs it more and watch what happens. And invariably, the person doing the sending, that person who isn't getting anywhere, does get somewhere, does start healing.
yeah, it's really true. I mean, I think it's that greater shift in the body. I think there's a feeling, well, Bill and I talk about the sensation in the body very, very often, but that there's a big shift in sensation when it's for and about another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen it again and again. I've seen it with Lisa, who was a bodywork practitioner who was trying to write a book. And she wasn't getting anywhere. She'd gone through 3 editors, nothing was working. And her group was intending for her, and nothing was happening. So I finally just said, Lisa, get off of yourself. Start intending for, and there was another woman called Diane in her group who had cancer. And so she started focusing on Diane. And the very next week, I kid you not, she gets this overwhelming impulse to go into a store she doesn't even need to buy anything from. She goes into the store, and when she's over looking at things, she sees a woman that she vaguely remembers meeting. And again, even though she's a shy person, she feels compelled to go over and say hi. She does, and they get chatting, and the woman, it turns out, when she hears about Lisa's project, turns out she's a book coach. She used to be a publisher. And when she hears about Lisa, she offers to coach her through the whole process and help her with marketing, which was Lisa's biggest fear. Upshot is it becomes an Amazon bestseller. She finishes the book and it's a bestseller. So I've seen that over and over again. The power of getting off of yourself isn't just a nice thing to do. It's a necessary thing to do if you're a human being.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Absolutely brilliant, right? Everyone, we got to take a quick break. UK Health Radio, take it away and stay tuned because when we come back, Lynne is going to share how to with us. It's amazing stuff. See you in a minute. All right. And we are back with Lynne McTaggart. You know, in the last part of this program, I'm sure, was mind-blowing for many of you that actually having a positive intention or actually reaching out and helping another creates a healing for you. So this is a principle, right? Has been kind of, people have been trying to get this across through the ages, you know, whatever you're lacking in your life, begin to give it. Well, this is, I love the way Lynne put it, which is, and she has the actual data, the data that it works. Go out and begin helping another, and all of a sudden, it helps you, which goes right along with this bigger picture of oneness, right? Lynne?
Absolutely. It does. And as I said, it's not just a feel-good thing to do. It's a necessary thing to do because it's part of that need for connection. I mean, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to carry on with their Power of 8 groups. And what we've been working on most recently is using Power of 8 groups to revitalize neighborhoods and communities. Because what ends up happening with a group, when you meet week after week after week, and that's what I always recommend for people, don't just meet for a little while. Create a Power of 8 group, and I do this in all of the courses that I teach. I help people get into groups, and I have them meet weekly. And you will find that by giving and receiving intention, you heal not just the physical body, but other parts of your life. So your relationships, I've had so many people heal or create new relationships. My favorite being Joy, who is in Australia, part of a course of mine. During lockdown, she does an intention to bring love into her life. In a few weeks, out of the blue, she gets a call from a boyfriend in the UK she had 35 years before. They start connecting, they start talking and connecting and writing and all of that kind of stuff and texting. Upshot is he ends up moving to Australia, going through the quarantine because it's still locked down, and they are in love and together.
Wow.
So those are, I see relationships healed, money problems healed, people getting exactly the living space they needed. Another woman I had in a course of mine just recently who was intending to find the perfect apartment for her and her dog. And she needed a space to work too. And she was intending with her group and nothing happening. And I say to everyone, one of the keys that I teach is never giving up. The people who keep meeting, who keep getting together, who keep the faith, they're the ones who succeed. And I see, in the first time I did this, and I started monitoring people for a whole year to see if everything in their lives would change. And I found of the people who continued to meet, not the drop-offs, but the people who continued to meet, pretty much 100% of them experienced some sort of major transformation. So I see it with this woman with her apartment. She didn't give up. About 8 months later, she gets a call out of nowhere from a guy who offers her not an apartment, but a house. And she figures, I'll never be able to afford this. She goes to see the house. It's brilliant. It's better than she ever thought. It's even got its own sauna. It's got a big backyard for the dog. It's perfect. And it's less money than she was willing to pay. So people who continue to believe, continue to intend in a group, and that's the key element, in a group. As I say, I see so many miraculous transformations.
Well, it's so exciting when you're in a group like that to see each member of the group receive or achieve the thing that they want to know, be, have, or do. So it's very uplifting. It's very encouraging. And you get to know people so well in these groups. And you can't help but want the best for each one. And the more we want the best for them, the more the best comes to us as well. So you said off camera that you would share with everybody a little bit of how to. What can a person do today to kind of get the ball rolling?
Okay, I will give you one of the many keys I teach in all of my courses because, there are 13 keys in all in my Power of Intention Masterclass. And in my forthcoming Intention Essentials course, there are 7 key essentials. So one of the ones I can share with you is the mistaken belief that you have to make it very general, because otherwise the universe will be limited in what it gives you. That is a complete falsehood. I have seen when we were not specific in our intention experiments, the experiment didn't work. Remember, we had the 4 that didn't work. Well, a few of those were not very specific intentions. As soon as we were specific, the universe heard, replied, and gave us the outcome. Now, it doesn't limit the outcome. Remember my woman who was looking for an apartment. She intended for this very specific apartment. The universe gave her what she wanted, but even more. So becoming specific is really important. And, as a former reporter, I was always taught that you've got to put in your first sentence and the first paragraph of your story, who, what, when, where, why, and how. So 5 W's and H. Now you don't need all 5 and H, but you need a bunch of them in your intention. What do you want? When do you want it? Who is it for? Etc. So be very specific and don't be afraid to say our intention is, because I'm going to always talk about groups here. Our intention is that Jane Doe be immediately, completely, and permanently healed of all pain in her right toe, her right big toe. It's okay to be that specific. Tell the universe what you want. So that's one of my key essentials. And there are many others. Learning how to cope with adversity. I've been teaching my own community recently. I just gave a talk, free talk, about using and thriving with intention during these uncertain times. And some of the tools that you use in intention are much beyond the ones I teach, are a mix of what's worked in the laboratory with mind over matter experiments, plus a distillation of some of the practices of intention masters. So there's master healers, Buddhist monks, Qigong masters. They do some things differently, but there are also some commonalities. And I've distilled all of those down to simple programs people can follow. But what most people don't do, as I say, is meet in a group and understand some of those and some of the importance of sometimes breaking intentions down. People will put in, my intention is to be rich and to find a mate and to do this and do that. And they're not actually being specific. For instance, even saying, I want to be rich. Well, what does that mean? Do you really want to be rich? Do you really want, 100 billion in the bank? Or do you just mean, I want more free time, or to spend with my children and grandchildren, or I don't want this job. I want something else. I want more time to myself, or a more fulfilling work, but I don't necessarily want to be rich. I just think that being rich is going to solve all my problems. And listening to many of those very wealthy celebrities on YouTube, I hear over and over again, I just heard 2, one from Jim Carrey and one from Matthew McConaughey, talking about how riches just didn't do it for them. So it's all about being specific and telling the universe what you want, and something more than what you hear in the positive and the popular literature about law of attraction, or, which is essentially, or if you hear the popular literature about intention, it's essentially, I believe, I receive, or I want, I get. And I see it's a lot more than that.
Getting specific is so, so, so important. Bill and I have seen this as well. A lot of people, when you ask them, who will you be when you have that thing? What will you do? What will you know? What will you have? And who will you be? You kind of get that blank stare. The other thing that we see a lot is people know exactly what they don't want. And you'll say, well, what do you want? Well, I don't want.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
It takes some time. So I want to just support what Lynne is saying. And everybody who's listening, listen to your own words. I want X, and then what will that get me? If you do that about 7 times, you usually get to the core of what it is you want and why. But, it's just about changing your whole life, just only that. So it's worth the effort to figure out what you really want specifically and functionally as well. So we're getting close to the end of our time on the UK Health Radio Network. I'm going to continue the conversation with Lynne in our after chat. So anywhere that you find your podcast that you like, it's #wellbeingpodcast, or look for the UK Health Radio Network. You can find the extended conversation and on YouTube as well. But before we close, Lynne, we've got about 6 minutes. Please share with everybody, how can they reach you? How can they interact with you? How can they do this work? What's happening next?
Okay, thank you for asking. Well, I have an Intention Essentials course coming up on June 24th. So that teaches the 7 key intention essentials and also how to overcome doubt and disbelief and self-sabotage. So that's an important first step, particularly in these times. And I find a lot of people are terrified about what's going on in the world today. So I teach them all the skills and help them get into Power of 8 groups. So that's my level 1 course. The other thing that's coming up for me is a retreat in what was the runner-up setting for Downton Abbey. It's called Broughton Hall. It's a stately home with 3,000 acres in Yorkshire. And it is stunning because the people who own the property, the descendants, the Tempest family, are also highly spiritual. So they set up a spiritual meeting place and beautiful restaurant called Utopia, a spa, fire pit, labyrinth, all of that stuff. And it's perfect for us. So we're holding that the first week of September. And with my retreats, and I only do one a year, I do Heal Your Past. And with this, we heal the past that is usually getting in the way of people's intentions. So for this, I do retro intention, which are a very specific type of intention I do to heal the energy around those past events. I also work with my husband, Brian Hubbard, author of The Untrue Story of You, who has developed a system he calls Time Light that helps people recover and heal from the pain of the past, something he used to heal his own abusive childhood, verbally abusive childhood. So we have that retreat. And the third thing I have coming up has to do with the state of the world right now. You know, I look at all of the crises we're facing now, and I think to myself, I need an army of change makers. And I actually sat back and realized I already have an army of change makers. There are tens of thousands of Power of 8 groups around the world. So I'm calling them in and giving them a place to communicate with each other on my community pages, so we don't have to deal with advertising on Facebook, etc. And I'm giving them free tools for a new world, is what I call it, which is using intention to create interconnected neighborhoods and communities themselves, intention and many other skills. All of that is completely free. I just want to start a social revolution. And as we see, almost every important revolution in our history has started small, started with a small group. So I really invite people to see all of this on my website, lynnmctaggart.com.
Oh my God. Everybody, you got to think about what we just said in this interview. You've got an opportunity to connect now with people with like intention and helping others. And in the same time, automatically, without you even trying, helping yourself. So this is so great that you now have a global platform that's regional, right? If you're in Budapest or you're in South America, there's probably a group near you that not only can you get up on Zoom, but you probably could even get together locally and have that. You know, if somebody's involved in this work, you know, there's a certain level of trust right there, right? The people that are kind of out there manipulating and coercing and doing the naughty things are probably not in this group. They don't have the mental capacity. So anyway, I want you to consider getting in contact with Lynne and her groups, joining her group, going to her seminars. it can only be just great. Give you a whole different life.
You know, it's really, really true. I hear every day, well, I can't find my community. I don't have like-minded people. Well, here it is. Here's your opportunity to find your like-minded group. And, you know, out of these groups, so many wonderful friendships happen. So for now, we're going to close. If you want to continue with us afterwards, Cognomovement on YouTube and anywhere that you find your podcasts, you can hear the extended conversation. For now, everybody in UK Health Radio Land, be safe and be well. And thank you so much, Lynne McTaggart.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Lynne.
So we're continuing our conversation, our after chat with author and world changer, Lynne McTaggart. And if you're just joining the conversation or you're listening to the clip, Lynne is the author of The Field and many other books. And there's a reason I'm saying The Field first. If you want to have an idea of all the foundations of everything we're talking about, and so many others around the planet are talking about how you personally can actually have influence on the world, influence on your own health, influence on your own wealth, but also influence on changing things on a global scale, this book is foundational. Look it up, read it, listen to it on Audible, but get that in your repertoire because it really is so important. So we're back with Lynne McTaggart and Bill Mckenna. All right, let's tell some weird stories. So Lynne, what is the weirdest thing you've ever seen happen in these intention experiments?
Oh, goodness. Well, I want to just bring everybody's attention to what actually is happening with intention experiments. So let me dial back to one of our early experiments, which was trying to make seeds grow faster. So I was working with the University of Arizona. They created a very scientific experiment. So they had 4 sets of seeds. So 3 were going to act as controls and 1 was going to be our target. So they labeled them A, B, C, D. I was going to speak in Sydney, Australia then. And so I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to try doing that experiment with that audience. So I went, I showed them the photos, A, B, C, D, of 30 seeds each. We chose to do intention for seeds A. We all did our intention. It was an audience of about 700. I didn't tell the scientists back in Arizona which ones we were choosing to do our intention on. I told them it was done. When it was done, that was their cue to plant the seeds. And then 5 days later, they measured them. And it was only at that point, after they were done, that I unblinded the study and told them, oh, actually, we did the intention for seeds A. It turned out seeds A did grow significantly higher than controls. So let's unpack this for maximum weirdness. First of all, we were in Sydney, Australia. Please think about this. The seeds were in Tucson, Arizona at the Laboratory for Consciousness with Dr. Gary Schwartz and his team. That is, if you travel from Sydney via California to Arizona, that's 8,000 miles away. Even longer if you go the other way around the globe. So we're in Sydney, the seeds are in Tucson, Arizona, 8,000 miles away. Plus, we're not intending for the seeds themselves, we're intending on a photo of the seeds, a symbol of the seeds, if you will. And yet we had this effect. And I did that 5 more times with different size audiences, one in Rhinebeck, New York, one in South Carolina, Dallas, Texas, Los Angeles, and then over the internet with thousands of my followers. And each time the seed sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. So that to me is weird enough. It is that we create some sort of psychic internet when we do intention as a group. And that changes the game completely.
Wow. It is so great to see that. You know, my daughter, when she was only 3 years old, it was coming up on summertime. and we had corn, and we had just a big bucket. And I said, okay, I took one of the kernels out, and we separated the kernels of one, and I said, okay, put all of your bad feelings into this kernel. All the bad things in your life. I want you to just put it in this kernel, and we put that kernel dead to center, right? So it's going to get maximum sunlight, maximum water. It's got the most fertile conditions in the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
We put the other seeds, and we did the same, but the opposite with the other seeds. And we had all of these many seeds that we put all of your good feelings into, and we planted them. Anyway, the seed in the center, black dwarfed, like literally black dwarf. And the other ones were vibrant green. And so I wanted her to have that experience, but how fun, that to realize, that it's the absolute bloody truth,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, while you were speaking, I was thinking of one of the more interesting outcomes and weirder outcomes with my Power of 8 groups. So I had one group of people in my master class, and they had been meeting week by week. And there was a woman whose house was right in the line of fire with the California fires.
Oh, yeah.
The fire was just coming toward her house. So the group did an intention for essentially a dome of protection to be over this house, for there to be no dust inside of it, and for the firemen who were trying to clear the fire to have a place of sanctuary to go into. So they do their intention, the fire passes by the house, and afterward the fire made a ring around the house like a dome. And there was no soot or anything in the house. It was used as a sanctuary for the firemen. So
Okay.
that was one of the more interesting ones that we've had.
It's like Star.
That officially counts as weirdness, high strangeness. That's incredible. Yeah. So, okay. So here's my thought around this as you're talking about it. Are we having an intention on an effect on an existing reality? Are we just creating a new one where in that case, the fire moves completely around? It's just like a dome. It's a new timeline. Or where there's a 25-year war and all of a sudden everybody puts their attention on it and the war ends where there's no end in sight. Are we just creating a new reality?
Okay, so that's sort of a many worlds question, isn't it? And the wonderful movie Everything Everywhere at Once,
Yeah.
It sort of speaks to something like that. I think my own interpretation is that we are actually creating every moment. And so we have that capacity as creators to change our reality at any moment. After all, quantum physicists have explained that in the subatomic world, nothing isn't anything yet. Everything is only a potential of something. So I like to describe it as, imagine that you've got a chair in the middle of a batch of chairs in an auditorium. A subatomic particle is that chair, but it's not just that one chair. It's every seat in the house all at the same time, every possible self all at the same time. And the only thing that turns it from every possible chair to a single chair is the involvement of an observer. So we are co-creating. We are creating that world. And here's the thing that people don't understand. Most people are pretty unconscious about what they're thinking about most of the time. And this is another thing I teach. We have about 70,000 thoughts a day. And if my groups and my courses are anything to go by, about 80% of those are judgmental, negative thoughts. But every single thought we have, every one of those flotsam and jetsam bits of information that go through our head, every little last mendacious thought, that is an intention, and it compounds into your life's intention and also the state of the world. So we are partly responsible for this. I mean, we're not necessarily, we didn't necessarily bring into existence some of the leaders of the world. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that we're going about our own lives being negative and self-defeating most of the time, and that is manifesting our realities. So we have the capacity to change. I'm convinced, and I've seen it and I've demonstrated it in 40 studies and thousands of Power of 8 groups, that we are creators. We have an innate skill inside us. Everybody does. Some people are more experienced at it, but everybody has this latent capacity. And we know this as children, but it gets denied by authority figures, our parents, our teachers, etc., to the point where we stop believing it. We stop practicing it. We are diminished. But we do have the capacity to heal ourselves, to heal each other, to even heal the world. We just have to relearn how to do this.
You know, this is what you're saying is so very, very important, and I want to illustrate this with something that blew my mind. It was many years ago when Columbine. Do you remember Columbine?
Yeah.
So there was a person who was in a religious order, and I'm not going to say the name because I don't want everybody out there contacting this person, but they were in a religious order, and they were standing in front of the entire Congress of other religious order people. Mm-hmm. And Columbine had just happened. Somebody gets up and says, "Hey, if there is a God, how can you explain this, allowing this atrocity in Columbine?" And this person's there, and they get taken over, meaning taken over, like the words start coming out, and has no idea where these words are coming from, but the words are literally coming out. And the words were, if you're familiar with the work of Dr. Cleve Baxter, you'll understand that you had something to do with this. If you had a negative thought or feeling, that has collected there in Columbine and become expressed. We are interconnected. We all, with our thoughts and feelings, are connected, and they get expressed. Anyway, as this is coming out of this person's mouth, they're like, "Oh, who's Dr. Cleve Baxter? Who is that? I have no idea." Ends up going home, Dr. Cleve Baxter, and boom, there it is. So Dr. Cleve Baxter did the experiments with houseplants. He was one of the original people with FBI or CIA and doing the polygraph. He attached the polygraph to the houseplants. And he went over and he was like, "I wonder if anything's going on." And, the machine was unresponsive, but he ends up intending to burn the plant, and the polygraph went nuts. Turns out that the plant was conscious. Now, for everybody watching, you can look all this up. It is, anyway, a lot of information on that. And it was even those Mythbusters did the experiment, and it was true as well. So my point is that the negative feelings that people are feeling are reactions. They are, in fact, automatic. You didn't choose it. I don't choose to be afraid. I don't choose to hate. I don't choose to be in fear. They're a neurological impulse, and then I think a thought equal to it. I get a feeling, and then I think a thought equal to that. Anyway, the work that Liz and myself does, we eliminate that neurological impulse. And then the person literally doesn't think the thought because they don't have the feeling. If I don't feel it, I don't think it. So in this way, you can begin to free yourself. And when those impulses are gone and you don't feel, you have room to think something else.
Mhm.
So
That's so good. That's so great.
So I know we only have Lynn for just a few more minutes. Lynn, I would just like to ask, you said that you lead a retreat about changing the past. So will you tell us one weird story before we go about someone changing the past?
Oh, goodness. Okay. I have a really interesting one that occurred with one woman who had vitiligo. You know, that's where she lost pigment in her arms and hands and body. And it had happened after she had had an infection in her mid-teens. So I had her go back there and change the energy around it. And I swear to you, because I saw it, her skin literally started repigmenting before our very eyes. So that was seriously weird stuff that went on. We have many, many stories. With our last retreat, which was also at Broughton Hall, this 16th century manor house, stately home in Yorkshire. We had a woman called Lee, and this wasn't so much weird as wonderful and typical. She had a terrible relationship with her father. They had had a horrific situation going on there. And she thought he was not well, and she really dreaded his passing because she thought it would bring up all of her awful feelings again for him. So we did work with her on retro intention in her group. And what I do too is group retro intention as well, and group fast forwarding in time. So I go back and forth in time. Anyway, it turns out that after she left the retreat, some months later, he did pass, and she found she was able to wish him well on his next journey. She had no residual anger. The anger she had had, it was all gone. It was all lifted. And she said it was like the heaviest weight had lifted. And that seems to happen a lot. We have a lot of that. I love that my groups, whether they're in the retreats or they're in our other courses where they're just meeting virtually, not in person, stay in touch. One of the groups, I mean, we always encourage everybody to get on WhatsApp with their group. And one of the women in a group of mine recently said she calls it her virtual first aid kit. So whenever she's in trouble with anything, health or anything, she lets all of her WhatsApp Power of 8 group know, and they do an intention right on the spot for her. And it works just about every time. So I love that it's her virtual first aid kit, her intention first aid kit.
That is so much fun. All right, you guys, speaking of fun, we could talk to Lynn all day long and into the night for weeks, but we need to let her go for now. So Lynn, I just want to say for Bill and I, thank you so much for being here with us. And from my heart to yours, thank you for being here for the world. Thank you for the work that you do and the changes that you've made and the influence you've had even on us.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be with you both.
Thank you, Lynn.
All right, everybody. We will have much more about reality shifting because it's one of our favorite subjects next week. We'll see you guys all again next week on anywhere you like to find your podcasts, Cognomovement YouTube channel, and of course, the UK Health Radio Network. Until then, be safe and be well. Thanks for being here with us on the New Life Perspective radio show. For more information or to find out more about the work that Bill and I do, please visit us at cognomovement.com or email us at info@cognomovement.com. See you again soon.